Humanity is in captivity, and until you see this, nothing will make any sense. And note, I say that humanity is in captivity. They are captives and not exiles. And also note that ordinary intelligence is wont to believe otherwise. And this gives the possibility of some rather automatic way out, since then they believe that this situation of being in exile is a temporary anomaly. This is to bring us up to date from last time when I just mentioned this. You are not, unless you're city people, you are not Jews in exile. You are not Hindus cut off from the Godhead. You're not Christians driven from the Garden of Eden. And no Moses is going to show up to deliver you. Or if you're of a Christian bent, Jesus is not going to come back. Or if you're of a Muslim persuasion, Allah is not going to call the day of judgment and bring up the dead and kill the living, which all religions have that idea, which you got to work on that on your own. I don't have time to go into that. But I believe I smell a Kairoot therein, but we'll wait and see. I am going to push us a little further than some of you may have on your own, having 48 hours that you heard this, whether you took any particular note of it. But it has some real, not verbal, not intellectual, but some real ramifications having to do with the nervous system and where man is situated within the body of life. Do note, I gave enough examples, but history is replete. Literature, not just religion, but literatures of all kinds. It comes out in myths. It comes out in nowadays so-called psychological and sociological interpretations of man and his institutions, and that is this belief that all men are in some way in exile. Now, it is not simply religion. One of the real post-war books, I guess the heart of the existentialist, or one of the hearts or the liver of it. Well, there's several books. Let me just lay on one, but there were several that came out of post-war Europe about man being a stranger to himself, about man's, and of course they're talking about man's thought processes, his personality, that man in some way, because of external circumstances, because of the war, because of people being uprooted and losing parts of their family, that man was now in some way psychologically in exile from his native self. And that's just to try and bring you up to date, and this is built into the nervous system of man when it gets to the point of speaking. It serves two distinct purposes that I'm going ahead and talk about. I don't care what life says. Let me see it. One is that it keeps open the door of hope forever. Now, of course, I say forever. Right up until you set foot into that great arbitrage. But up until then, it is built into the nervous system the feeling that there is some possible hope, that Jesus may come back, that Moses will suddenly spring up and say, "Ah, here I am, going to lead us out of here, back to where we belong," which is another question as to back where we belong. But as long as there's this feeling, then you have hope. You believe that things can change as long as it's built in, regardless of your culture, regardless of your religion, regardless of your education. As long as it's built in that I am in exile, not captivity, Now you can be in exile and be in captivity, but captivity would then simply be a side effect of being in exile. Because if you were not, to use another one of those historical examples, if you were not a Jew in Egypt, and you're of course in captivity, you're under the control of the Pharaoh there, but if you were not in exile, you would not be in captivity is the point. If you weren't there, if you were not out of place, if you were back wherever you belong, you would not be in captivity. Right? Certainly it's right. So captivity, even if people admit, all right, I guess we're in captivity, but the only reason I am in captivity is I have been thrown into the hands of some enemy. That I am in exile. I am not in my native home. If I was back where I belong, I would not be in captivity. I would be master of my own fate, captain of my own destiny. There is that great purpose. Then there is the purpose that goes further than just the molecular level of keeping people harboring in their nervous system. A feeling that there is some possible surcease from my suffering, from my fears. The other one is, as it comes out into man's so-called art, into his thoughts, into his science, into his literature, that is that the basis of all human problems is this temporary anomaly. Of course, to say temporary, some of them would admit, all right, we think it's temporary, but it may not correct itself in my lifetime. But the nervous system, down even at a nonverbal level, sends out the message that it is reversible. It is transient, although it may not cure itself in my lifetime, in 100 years, 1,000 years, the great old Jewish story and now the Christian story that a Messiah is going to come. You know, just because he didn't show up in 20 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, that didn't stop the story. And that's not the dumbness of some group of people. It's in the nervous system that it keeps going. And somebody outside that particular bloodline springs up, like some Muslim could, you know, laugh at a Jew for believing the Messiah's going to come. You've been hearing that for 4,000 years. Well, not 2,500 years. But an Arab thinks the same thing. A Muslim thinks the same thing in a different way. Believes the same thing. And then it comes out as thought. It is then built in all the way from those kind of religious stories, again I'll bring you up to date, to Freudian psychology, or even beyond that. I guess I should quit saying that. I guess Freud's about washed up, isn't he? But at any rate, contemporary psychology. That is that your condition, even a fairly normal person, of course, is unbalanced, according to psychology, but that everybody's condition is temporary, even if they don't know how to cure it right now. It's temporary on this basis, that life caused your distress. It is a transient anomaly. And if you lived long enough, if you could afford enough analysis, or if you lived long enough that they could make some further progress, then whatever this severe bruise on your personality is could be cured. As long as you believe that you're in exile, you'll remain captive and in a sense like it. In a real sense, be blind to it. But when I say like it, of course it does not belie the fact that people rail against life and the apparent restraints, but it's that they are not fatalistically pessimistic, such as if in some way someone who didn't know better and had the power could make humanity, that could step out on the stage of this planet and holler, "You're all captive," and say it in such a way that all people in the city would go, "My God, that's correct." Now, Larry would have problems with that. Life would have problems. Life may then be suffering from a pretty serious tumor of some kind. But as long as people do not know that, as long as they can even hear that kind of message, they can even feel that kind of thing, that I am in a certain kind of captivity, but it's because of this transient state of exile. And of course, if they are pushed to the wall, then they can always fall back, not just upon a Messiah or a Moses or somebody showing up now to help me, or a Freud revisited. If it comes to it, at least when I die, I'll return from this disgraceful state of exile, because at least then I'll go home. I'll go where I belong, back to the source, back to the Godhead, back with Allah, back with Jesus, back where the angels live. And I don't mean Los Angeles. I don't think. If I presented this idea, if I were going to, in the city, in such a way that I could get some people, some ordinary people, to say, well, you're right, we are in captivity. Humanity is in a certain way. I could get them to agree to this kind of thing verbally. We would have two distinct classes of people. They'd have to be fairly intelligent. Should I say they'd have to be city-level intelligent. But then they would divide themselves into two classes. The first would say, all right, you're correct in a certain way. They would say, well, I'll go along with the discussion. In a certain way, man is in captivity. And one group would say, man is a captive from without. Prime example being Marxist. That kind of philosophy. That, all right, man is a captive, but it's because of external influences and limitations. The other group would say man is a captive. All right, I'll agree to that. He's a captive, though, but the captivity arises from within. And to try and bring it as up to date as possible, I guess we could say that they would be exemplified by a sociobiologist that have that kind of one-dimensional or even two-dimensional theories that a great deal of man's behavior is genetic. Oh, I know they're taking a gamble going out on a limb like that. Of course, they're going out on a limb that has another tree on the end of that limb. So that's why it can be denied, and that's why they have to defend it, and that's why they'll say, oh, much of his behavior. The thing I wanted you to see was that ordinary consciousness, not just people out there, but ordinary intelligence can get a glimpse. Could go along with what I'm saying for the sake of conversation. And so we are maybe not only in exile, we may be in some kind of captivity. But then they would divide themselves, see. And the point of ordinary intelligence always dividing itself into two is you have always got the way out. That is, the first group I mentioned is exemplified by the kind of Marxist ideas. Just very materialistic ideas. That, all right, they would say, man is in a certain way captive, but it's because of these external influences. And as long as you've got one out of two possibilities, there's a way out, don't you see? And you don't have to believe in Moses or the Messiah going to show up. As long as you got that, you say, all right, man is in captivity, but it arises from these external influences. And that's not the end of the sentence, because then what is being said, at least tacitly, is, all right, if we can do away with that, which of course the Marxists said, and they weren't the only ones, they weren't the first, nor will they be the last. But what they are saying tacitly, if we could do away with these untoward external influences of captivity, then we would have man, the free bird. We would have man sans captivity. And on the other hand, those in the past who have been a more religious persuasion, or the sociobiologists today, would say, all right, if in some way we could wean man, kind of, I guess, evolutionary determinist, if there is such a thing. But if they would say, all right, man is in a certain way captive, but the captivity arises from within. If in some way we could wean man from this, at least partially, hold of the past, kind of reptilian brain still blossoming, the kind of feral, unconscious influences that drive men to be greedy and to be promiscuous and to want to exercise power and dominance over his fellow man. But see, as long as they say that, they still got an escape clause in this, even temporarily, agreed upon contract of captivity that we seem to have with somebody. There seems to be an escape clause. as long as the captivity comes from one or two places. And it doesn't matter where. In this case, it just seems to be that the only way that they could say, all right, the captivity has got to rise from either within or without. Now, that's the only thing that's reasonable. Any of you who can listen to me fast, it doesn't have to be that. If somebody said, all right, you're right, men are captives, but the captivity either arises from Omaha or from my crayon box. It doesn't matter. Of course, that doesn't make sense to you. So it's got to apparently be something that makes sense that the captivity either arises from external limitations, pressures put upon man, the individual, by these unholy, ungodly, unprofitable, unhumane institutions, political pressures, machineries, the capitalistic system, or on the other hand, it's got to be the kinds of psychological, subconscious traumas that make men operate in ways perhaps not in their own individual best interest. Or it's got to be their little reptilian genes still acting up. It's got to be holdovers from their primate days. As long as you've got one of two possibilities, you have got a way out in your belief. Because you're still saying, without knowing it, you're still saying, all right, we're in exile. That is, we're not where we belong. All right. Now, a real revolutionist has got to understand that, like in that situation, that it's either external, the captivity is rising from externally, or it's rising internally. As always, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. But if you stop there, you're looking at a kind of intellectual wreck. If you stop there, you'll never see it. If you stop there and say, well, all right, one of those two could be true. Or if what you're saying is correct, and I sort of sense maybe it is, then, all right, one of those two has got to be the predominant influence. It's all the same. Only good old Chief Two Eyes, back on the reservation of the city, believes that it hears something like, all right, man's in captivity. And Chief Two Eyes, being the intellectual sort, says, all right, that could be true. Now let me ponder. Is the captivity arising entirely from internal? Or is it coming from external? Or is it a little of both? If so, which is the predominant? Don't tell me, because you just say you didn't even tell me. I was the one that came up with the idea that, all right, if there is that kind of captivity, it either arises from within man or from without, from his institutions, his culture. So, see, I'm pretty smart. You didn't even tell me that. You just said man's in captive. So don't tell me more. I was smart to figure that out. Now I'll figure out which one it is. You're on an express train going. It's both. It's both. Or the people in the city wouldn't see that there was a choice. It's always both. But moreover, a real revolutionist has got to see this situation as it is, and then concern him or herself with the only thing that's possible. The only thing that's possible. And that's the potential of individual escape. That's it. Not escape for your family, not escape for just you and one other person. Go back and re-churn up the story of Noah. As you know, if I pull out any kind of story historically, I'm going to straighten it out, because it's not exactly right the way you heard it. Think about it. In the story of the flood, and that thing about Noah, I assume some of you know it's not important, but that did not originate in the Bible. That story is all over this planet, just everywhere. You just step in it. But notice the story. Noah, I assume all of you know, he brought on two of everything. Close, but no cigar. Of course, for the city, it was just right. It has to be two. But for a revolutionist would know this: escape is only possible not with two. Sorry. Yeah, but it's just me and my brother, my little brother. You know, he ain't too smart. It's got to be me and him. No. Or it's got to be me and my mother. I mean, look at all she's done for me. I'm looking. Can me and her get on board? But see, in the city, it's always got to be, because at the very least, even if you didn't have a little brother or a mother you cared for, at least you don't get on board. It's you and who? Well, me and myself. Me and the partner. Me that talks and me that listens. We both got to come on board. In fact, we were talking about it out there. No. The only possible escape is for one. One. That's why the Noah story is intriguing. That's why people remember it, because it's wrong. That two could get on board. Well, see, what other story can ordinary consciousness, binary consciousness, perceive? It cannot perceive. It would never thought of that. I could say it to somebody in the city. Somebody rang just off a regular binary consciousness and say, that story is wrong. It was one of everything, and I could give them some little something not dissimilar to what I just said to you. And some ordinary people would laugh and go, ha, ha, ha. But to them, it's actually a joke. But how could it be otherwise? That's the way of being chief two eyes and thinking that way. All right, if there's going to be destruction, how many people are going to be saved? I mean, you don't have to stop and think about it. The answer is always two. Could be more, but the answer is at least two. The same way to anything in the city. All right, there's a question. We have an important question in life. How many possible answers can there be? They don't have to think in the city. Well, there's at least two answers, the right one and the wrong one. Maybe a whole bunch of wrong ones, but at least we've got two answers, the right one and the wrong one. There are not two answers to every damn question, not unless you're an idiot. That is, unless you're cityfied. There's one answer to every question. Not a right one and a wrong one. That's back in the city. You're back trying to drag you and somebody else on the ark. By the way, I don't know when I'm going to be able to market it. I came up with a new tool that I just thought, I guess I've been working on it subconsciously. The tool is the I like it. I like it. From night before last, and even into the night before that of our meeting, if you recall, I pointed out that the populace inside of your state has just almost no respect whatsoever for what seems to be your ruling family, your seat of power. And I point out to you very specifically, because what seems to be your ruling power up until now cannot, has not, will not, take your choice for the time being, exercise unconditional, unrepentant, irreversible, unappealable power. Now, I wonder if any of you recall more than several times I have encouraged all of you, even though it's kind of a futile task in a sense, but to try and continually straighten up your desk. I have, in fact, gotten more specific and said that you should do every little minor detail, every little penny ante chore that pops up in your life. I never asked anybody what you made of that, whether I was trying to turn you all into little neat marionettes of some kind. I know every time I'd mention it, some of you, your eyes would sort of sparkle like, I just know there's something to that. That's what it is. Ordinarily people, ordinarily city people, will not exercise specific, direct, incontestable power even in petty affairs. And every damn one of you would be better off, now that I've at least put it in words and you'd have something to chew on, And it doesn't matter what, it's not to please me, but whatever it is in your life, around your house, around your apartment, around the garage, in your life, whatever it is, and forget where the hell it came from. It came from being alive. That the voice that's talking in you will turn around and continually says, I should turn off the lights. Or it says that every time you lay down an empty cup or dish in the sink, that you should go ahead and wash it. And you don't. Your people just go and they've been doing it all of your life toward what seems to be the would-be king. I suggest to you that his crown is probably made out of silly putty by now. Of course, I don't have to suggest this. All you got to do is look and see what you think about yourself, what you think about your ability to exercise some willpower. There. You got your own answer. How satisfied you are with your own ability. Yeah, we're talking about serious ability. I'm talking about the kind of ability that you think, I should put up dishes every time. I should just wash them since I'm living here by myself. I just wash, every time I eat, I'll just wash a dish and I'll put it back up. You've been thinking that for decades. I should wash my car more often. I should, whatever it is. It doesn't matter how small. And you don't do it. And everybody in the city, if asked, could give some reason why. It's unimportant. It's a holdover. My mother just nagged me. She just drove it into my brain. I don't give a damn. It's just her voice talking. I don't care what I do about this. You care. Not in some city sense, not in some objective sense, but your nervous system is talking and you're listening. And when you listen and do not do anything about it, you've got the situation I've already described, that everyone's populace has almost no respect whatsoever, no regard. It's true out there when it happens, and you don't have to have me come up with some historical made-up example. Look inside yourself. Every one of you would be better off if you would try, for no reason other than what I'm telling you, that every little voice that speaks up in you of every one of these little penny-ante, red-ass, minor, chicken shit, things that a voice in you, your voice apparently keeps saying you should do this or you should not do that. You should not throw your clothes on the floor, hang them up every time. I don't care what time of day it is, do it. Is do it. It's not to make me happy. It's not to make your mother happy. It's not to make your subconscious happy. Because your mother and your subconscious and probably me can't be made happy by the likes of you. Only you can. And you cannot be happy when the populace thinks about the king as a joke. Who cares what he says? Have we ever cared? Does it matter? Not hardly. Next paragraph. Under revolutionary wartime conditions, the following holds true. Got nothing to do with the city, although I guess I'll, probably before it's over here, I might point out some of the ways it reflects itself. But what I'm going to start speaking of specifically would be for people such as we'll assume you think you are, some of you believe you are, and it's under revolutionary wartime conditions, and it is the following: that those that act like they think the most are usually those that actually should be thinking the least about what they do. All right, EI. Those kind of ordinarily intellectually centered people that would find themselves, probably accept the designation, if not put it on themselves, that they are too hesitant, too introverted, too shy, too self-conscious. But notice the delirious justice of it, that under the ordinary conditions when you see it, those that apparently go around and those who appear to think the most are those that should be, in that same sense, thinking the least when it comes to acting, behaving, doing. And I could get even people in the city to agree. That they would say, yeah, once you say about being self-conscious and shy, you're right. I think too much about what I'm going to do, and sometimes I just think myself into almost a state of exhaustion, and I don't do anything. So I guess you're right. In fact, you probably are right, and that's one reason I'm in analysis now. Now back to you people. There is no way to analyze your way out. Because if you're going to do that, you might as well just devote more hours of the day to thinking about acting instead of paying somebody. In part, a correct sign of a real revolutionist would be that he or she thinks at the proper time and spots, but then acts when it is seasonal and salutary. What else are you going to say about it? Now in the city they can say things. Well, sometimes you're not sure how to act or exactly what to do, and you need to think some more. In a revolutionary sense, if you feel as though you've got to think some more, there's the time. There's a waste of time. If you had the instant ability to think some more in a profitable manner, you would not be staying there with your finger in a strange part of your anatomy, as they say in the South. The belief that I have now got to think some more because I am sort of uncertain as to what to do, that is the very time, if you're in time of warfare, which those of you that are on the train here at the right speed, it is a time of warfare. It is Titus and Bellow. It is a peaceful, stimulating, profitable time of war, but warfare nonetheless. If you were in that kind of warfare, you would understand that the very times, as insane as this sounds, all right, as irrational as it sounds from the city level, the very times that you would think, all right, what I need to do is think some more, is the very time you shouldn't. And of course, I do not mean to do something that is going to prove unprofitable, damaging, deadly, harmful to you, but the belief that since I seem to be uncertain right this second as to what I should do, then obviously doing is not in order, more thinking is. Wrong, old sport. Wrong, wrong, wrong. I'll start where I commenced this paragraph. Those that act like they think the most are usually those that should think the least about what they're doing. You cannot have it both ways. All you can in the city. That's why you got 2 legs and 2 eyes and 2 brains. And 2 possibilities. Both of them start with D. I'll admit to you, I brought up this last paragraph as sort of a teaser because I am seriously contemplating trying to push some of you right up against a new piece of your face, and it has to do with the kinds of things I've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 meetings. But this is very close to a dastardly question. I could present it as a question. You wouldn't, those of you that could hear it wouldn't take it as a question. Some of you would take it and probably leave the room. You might have to leave the building. But it has to do with, we got 5 minutes here before we got to cut the tape over, so I'll kill a few more minutes. It has to do maybe with certain areas like the partnership in general, and having what seems to be 2 voices that talk to you. The one that talks and one that listens, and then one listens and the other one talks. And maybe the possibility that there is a very specific, not just me talking about it and scouting around and sketching and hinting, but very specific, unknown but very specific physiological necessities, understandable physical needs going on and being fueled and satisfied by this. And I could put it in such a way that, as I said, I'd suggest that probably some of you would have to get up and leave the building for the night. Some of you might slap your head so hard that you'd probably end up in an emergency ward. And so, having your health as my first concern, I will not do it. What we're going to do is, I'm going back to some more of the questions tonight, but you people out there in video land, I've decided you can let visitors stay here as I continue doing these. Second part of the tapes is responding to the questions here and the ones that I get from you people out of town, if I get any. So, we'll turn the tape over, but from now on, visitors can stay. I'll say a word or two before I start on the other side. But you can consider this still the public tape. Could I have another little one? Somebody remember that for me. I like that. Maybe that's why I should have given some of you for the holidays. Ready? Hi, folks. All right, for you visitors, I am going to spend the rest of tonight's tape. I got questions here that the people here have written that I solicited from them a week or so ago, and I told them and people out there in video land to submit questions of a very practical nature that you find to be continually troublesome in your life, or you can write it about a third party, a fictitious person, a hypothetical question, but not to consider that anything was beneath you, because we're not going to laugh at the questions, even though you're going to laugh oftentimes at my responses, I know. But we're going to treat all the questions as being serious and sincere. But I need to give a consumer advisory to you visitors. One is, I'm going to give very direct and specific responses to the questions. And I'm going to treat them as though they are practical questions. I have not really taken out those that were very theoretical or touching on ideas that I may have been talking about for the last few weeks, or the kind I talked about tonight on the first part of the tape, but more on the nature, as you'll see, of what's going on in somebody's life, and them asking specifically, how could this be affected, what might I do, etc. So I'm going to be giving very specific, very direct responses. Well, let me point out that they have a known effect if a real revolutionist uses them. But if an ordinary person uses what I say, the effect is going to be otherwise. I'm just saying that not only to visitors, but to the rest of you. If you go back to being you and you try doing some of the things that I say, the known result, the specific result I had in mind, speaking to you on the level that a real revolutionist asks a question and is listening to the response, you're not going to get the effect that I am calling the known effect that would have. And also, although I said I'm going to treat the questions as being about, these questions about practical problems as being sincere and serious, also everybody remember, I'm treating them that way, but they're not. They're not serious problems. I'm using them as an excuse to talk. But there's not a one of these problems that's serious. They're not sincere. But as far as you're concerned, they were sincere and serious. And I'm going to respond to them. But especially you visitors, at least any of you, like the first few times that may be seeing me in these tapings, I am not a psychologist. I'm not here to help people with their problems. Because these are not problems. These are just excuses to talk. But these are not problems. And I don't take them as such. I'm not trying to help anybody. Because anybody that should be doing this does not need help. They can use my assistance, they can use the information, but they don't need help. And they're sure as hell not going to get help. Even if they need help, they're not going to get it. So, I guess that's enough advisory. The questions, as many as we can. I need a couple of minute epilogue tonight. So, one, I want to start. If you recall, I got in the middle of somebody's question that I was tying in. If you recall, somebody was asking about what's a good way to deal with nosy people, always want to know what's going on. And I point out that if you truly decided that you were not going to reveal, if you were the king, if you were an established power within yourself and you decide not to give out state secrets, that's it. But now, let me tie this before I go to the rest of that person's question, another aspect. Also, you recall that someone was asking, how could they make somebody know that they meant what they said? And the question was about that they were telling somebody, don't bring me bad news, don't try and engage me in negative gossip because I'm not going to play with you, and the person kept doing it. And I said that the real answer is, if you mean what you say, if you mean in that instance to tell somebody, hey, don't bring me bad news, if you told somebody, hey, don't ask me personal questions. If you meant it, if you meant in the same way that an absolute monarchy would, not a conditional, not a legislative, not a limited monarchy, but a monarchy, a one ruler that answers to no one, if you had that sort of governmental, that sort of power within you, and it says, do not tell me bad news. Do not ask me anything about myself. And I was, forget the low dramatics I did with that kind of sneer. You don't have to do that. You simply state it. And if you mean it, no one will bring you bad news, and no one will ask you personal questions. There's another aspect I want to mention about this. I know that many of you believe that you feel some of what I'm saying, and you just can't believe that you could make yourself do it, or you're not sure where to start. Let me tell you one other aspect of this. If you mean what you say, people will not be offended. And that's what nobody's wired up to understand. In other words, probably, well, most of you would think, and it would be true, that your most intrigue-filled connection is with your blood kin, like your mother or father. And I know that many of you would probably say that you wish you could get your mother not to ask you personal questions, let's say, or to give you bad news. But then many of you, if you'd hear me say it, you got to mean what you say. And I know that many of you feel a small tingle in your nervous system, like, I know it's true, but I can't do it with my mother. You're wrong. Let me use that just as an example. If you could in some way establish, if miraculously you could pull yourself together and bring forth in you a monarch, if you could tell your mother, I don't care what kind of past dance you've been doing for 40 years. Now I'll agree to this, it might take 2 times. It's really 1.5 times. If you could really do it, it only takes once, but I'm trying to give you breathing room. If you could, as an absolute monarch, fully, unconditionally, saying that you mean what you say, believe it or not, your mother, even your mother, will not be offended. There are other words I could use, and I even hate to because there is no ordinary terminology in the city to cover it. I can say fearful, and it's not that. Your mother suddenly doesn't become afraid of you and think that you're a maniac, but it's a kind, let me try another one, it's almost a kind of grudging respect. It's the same thing I was trying to describe to you night before last, that the populace of an external state would have if the king says, look, people, don't bring me bad news. some of the people, let me carry it this far, I can say that some people might go, oh, you know, that's part of my fun, or I've been doing it so long, I don't believe I can refrain from it. And the guy that just said that, his wife says, well, you do know that good King Wartnose killed the last person that brought him bad news. And her husband goes, well. And so what he's saying is, well, maybe I can refrain. And he may sort of pout like, well, I don't want to. But if he looks up and he sees the king, and he looks at the king, and based upon what his wife just said, and look at the king, he gets the impression that, come to think about it, he probably has a pretty short fuse for that kind of... It's almost a kind of respect. But see, even that doesn't cover it, but I'm just trying to give you 2 or 3 ways that you might look at it. The dance between back to you and your mother is a prime example probably with most of you. Believe it or not, if you truly meant what you said of, Mother, don't ask me personal questions. If you truly meant it, not only will she stop, but she will not be offended. There'll be a few moments, a few minutes of awkwardness. There is, anytime you're dancing and suddenly you change the step that you and this person's been doing a waltz and suddenly you break into a tango. You got to understand the other person is going to be caught off guard. That's a fact. And they may try and step again into 3, 4 times. And so your mother may, after 5 minutes, after 5 seconds, next time you see her, but it may happen shortly, or just in minutes, that she starts again. Well, I've got to ask you so-and-so. Now here is the way that you have got, if you are a true sovereign to yourself, you do not do it out of hostility. But here is what you would do at the most practical level, is you'd get up and say, I told you not to ask me. I'll see you next time, and leave. Not mad. A king does not get mad. If he does, you got a Kmart king. Now we've been through that. What kind of king is going to stand up there and somebody down in the audience send him up a Bronx chair and he gets mad? Or he says, from now on, I want the streets cleared at 10 o'clock, and he looks down and there's 2 or 3 people going and pouting. What the fuck does a king care? What does it mean for those kind of peons and serfs, the minions in you, what they care? Your mother, back to that instance, I am telling you literally, if you try this with ordinary intelligence, you will not get the known result. I'm telling you people, if you could say it and mean it, if you said, listen, just out of clear blue sky, you're going to see her 2 or 3 times a year or whatever, and you're there over the last holidays, the next time you see her, and she starts on something about, are you still living with that girl or that guy that you're not married to? And you said, as a sovereign, and you said, do you notice I do not ask personal questions about you or any of the other family? Have you noticed that? And you're making a statement. You're not asking. I'm just giving you an easy way to start the conversation real quick. Because you cannot palaver on about this. A king does not go out and ramble on and on. For one instance, now I think about it, that's why Castro has never been crowned. That bastard will talk for 5 hours. That was part of, now that I think about it, I can extend it, the downfall of the European monarchy is all of these communists and these totalitarians after World War II that get up and make a speech that goes on for hours and hours, and all they're saying is, hey, I'm still in control and you bastards watch it. But if you got there and talk for 5 hours, it gets more and more tenuous. The people think, well, all he's trying to do is impress us, but God, I wish I could go home. I got to go pee. I got a little bathroom. And he keeps talking. So all I'm trying to get you to see is it short and sweet. You don't get in a discussion with your mother. You say, I'm just trying to give you an easy way. Because I'm telling you literally, I'm responding to these questions. I'm telling you, if you are a revolutionist, if you can do this, I'm telling you how to make immediate, drastic change. And change this much more than any of you saying, well, sometimes it bugs me because people are poking my business. You don't know how bad it bugs you. A monarch cannot put up with that. A revolutionist can't put up with that. If you don't have any secrets, you got no revolution. You're out playing with kids. You got this little camouflage uniform that you got for Christmas. And you're out there playing. And your mother and everybody else from the house can see you, and they think, oh, tut-tut, isn't he sweet? She hollers, what are you doing? You go, nothing, nothing. Of course, now forget your mother. We're talking about life. Honey, what are you doing? And you'll try and validate yourself. You'll answer any question. A stranger walks up to a clipboard and says, how's your sex life? And you'll answer it. Back to what I was going to give you very specifically. As you sit down after a few minutes and your mother starts about something about your personal life, you say, Mother, have you taken any occasion to notice that I do not ask you personal questions about yourself other than your health, but I don't ask you anything personal. I don't ask you about any of the aunts or uncles. Have you noticed I don't engage in gossip about anybody? And you make it a statement. And then you say, don't ask me personal questions about my life. And I'm serious. Don't ask me. If there's anything going on that's of interest and I want you to know, I'd tell you. But I do not engage in that sort of gossip. I thought maybe you would have noticed that by now, but you hadn't, and I'm going to tell you the truth. Don't do that. I'm not going to engage in it. And I'm telling you, I'm not. And then go get you a glass of water, go to the bathroom, and if you come back in a few minutes she does it, you say, now I told you. Now, I'm not going to engage in that. I'll see you. And get up and leave. Now, I didn't say get up and let her start a conversation. I'm telling you exactly how to do it. Get up and leave. You hear I'm not making any conditions, any possibilities. I don't care if she runs out and clutches you by the ankles. I don't care if she curses you and tells you that you're giving up your breath. I don't care what happens. Tell her, say, I told you that I'm not going to engage in that. But you have got to do it in a sovereign manner. You have got to mean what you say. You've got to be in control, and it requires no hostility whatsoever. You say, I told you I wasn't going to engage in that. And anybody mean what they said, what would they do? Well, you're not going to throw her out, which a king could do. You say, I told you I'm not going to do that, and I'm in it. You say, give her a kiss or whatever you normally do, and leave. Wait until the next time it's time for you to go. If it's 6 months, just leave and wait until it's time for you to show back up and go back in like it never happened. And if she starts again, say, now I told you last time I was here that I wasn't going to do that. Hug her and leave. So I'm saying I'll give you a time and a half. That is the way to do it. But now I'm telling you more, but I was trying to use an example I thought would step on some of you people's little feelings and your own blood ties. You can do that in life. The question here the person asked about people asking a nosy question, the person didn't even ask me on the basis of family. But you can stop it with strangers. Well, I shouldn't say strangers, like at work, just acquaintances. If you have already told yourself that you do not tolerate inquiries into your life, not hostilely. That's part of the joke that I've made sometimes about, I've said real revolution is some of these spiritual heroes and people wanting to write books and people still trying to write about Moses and Jesus and what he'd do and where he'd disappear, the lost years of his life. Those kind of people, if they existed, there weren't any lost years of their life, there were boring years somewhere. This kind of secret that, boy, I wish I knew exactly how Swami so-and-so or such and such guy lived. It's not some hostile defense of you keeping people out of your life. It's more than you imagine. You people are correct that you are beginning to wish that people did not nose around your business and etc. You don't really understand why, but you are correct. You should not be doing it. But if you mean, not just what you say, but if you mean that you've told you that I'm not going to discuss myself, people will not be offended, even if you have to tell them. If acquaintances at work, if somebody starts just chit-chat around the office cooler, and you change the subject, because I've tried to tell you people before and you won't face up to it, you don't even really have to tell strangers not to ask about your business. People are not blood kin. All you got to do is just reverse it, just turn it on them. That's all you got to do, and you people won't believe it, you won't try it. You don't really have to, but I was going ahead and ask the question, if you have to, but this is the most inefficient way. If you have to, is tell an acquaintance, is, hey, have you noticed I don't inquire into anybody's business here, including yours. You ever notice that? But you make it like a statement. And you say, I expect that same kind of relationship from the rest of you. That is the most inefficient, because you're going to get the person off balance. The most efficient way is somebody asks you a question, you ask them a question. That's always the way. Always. Somebody says, hey, where do you live? What part of town? You say, where do you live? You don't do it hostilely. You don't do it with a smirk. You just do it. And no matter what they ask, you keep asking another question. That's the efficient way, because that will wear people's ass out in a hurry, and they don't know why. Now, I told a few of you this. I'll go ahead and give you another little secret. But you have got to do this without any hostility. And that's really the summation of what I'm saying about reversing, is always answering their question with a question. There is one wrap-up to all of it. But you've got to be able to do it and mean it. That is, with no hostility. Because you've got to be able to mean, you have got to be completely in charge of what you're doing and saying, or there's always some hostility. Which is just a word. There's always that tension, because there's always that uncontrollable energy transfer going on, the unexpected, as you would call it. But here is the one question that no matter what anybody asks you, your mother, a priest, a stranger, your boss, as they ask you any personal question, there's only one question, if you know how to do it, to turn back on them, and that is, what do you want to know? It's that one. You may have to ask that same one 2 or 3 times, and they ask something else. They say, well, because I da-da-da-da. You say, well, why do you want to know? And they go, well, I was just, I was interested because I'm interested in all my employees. Why? Well, I don't know. I like to feel like I'm close to people that work for me. Why? But you understand, I'm saying that's a version, saying why is a version of why do you want to know. That's the question. It just seems blunt, and most of you would be running a little risk of falling back into ordinary habits because it sounds smart-alecky and sounds smart-ass to probably most of you. But if you could do it, and it was in free time, which is, I guess, what you'd think of in the city as being objective, but I'm telling you it was without any hostility, which it would take you fully meaning what you're doing. You would have to be a king to say it, because only a real king can say something ungodly with no hostility. And if you can do that, no one will be offended. They can't think about it, but you can say something that verbally sounds offensive, such as asking somebody, why do you want to know? Now, us staying here talking, even verbally, that sounds reasonable when you come to think about it. You're doing your job, and some supervisor comes over after you've been there a while, comes over the water cooler and says, hey, what part of town do you live in? Now, is it unreasonable? You're doing your job, you're there on time, you're earning your money, in a sense. Now, no hostility, but just listen, at the city level. Isn't it reasonable for you to think, well, what business is that of yours? Not that you have anything to hide, but why are you asking me where I live? Right? But it seems so blunt, because life is not arranged in the city for your boss or a stranger. A guy with a clipboard comes up and says, pardon me, how's your sex life? And as I pointed out, life is wired in such a way that almost everybody will stop, and even if they turn crimson and go, well, they'll check their time, and they'll be inclined to go ahead and answer. The person with the clipboard in the city would almost take offense if you just stopped and said, well, why do you ask? The kind of feeling is, well, don't you see I have a clipboard and a name tag? And you'd be running the risk in the city, if everything else was equal, with this stranger going, well, I don't need a smart ass like you, go and ask somebody else. Of course, it is not just the guy with the clipboard thinking, well, it must be self-evident that I got a clipboard and I got some authority to ask you. It's the way your life is wired up. And that's why you people feel as though that there's a problem. How can I make my child understand when I sell her something or him something that I mean it? Life is wired up in such a way that you're not supposed to mean it. That's why. And they're not supposed to believe you mean it. Or people ask, how can I stop other people from being nosy? You got to mean it when you put out the message, verbally or otherwise, that I don't give out secrets. I don't even talk about myself, period. You got to mean it. If you don't mean it, the question is useless. They know you don't mean it. Where do you live? What part of town do you live in? Well, I don't discuss things like that. Oh, what are you hiding, huh? Are you between places? Have you been thrown out? Are you actually a child of somebody wealthy? Do you live over on the other side of town? What's actually up? That's the way life is wired up. And you still feel subject to it, unless you absolutely mean, either verbally or otherwise, that I'm not going to talk about me. If you mean it, you understand. Even though I'm responding to these, when I say they're not really problems, that's no problem. That's not a question. If you meant I'm not going to talk about myself, how could you ever write me a question or yourself like, well, now wait, how am I going to handle this specific instance over here when somebody did so-and-so? I've already answered that. That is to yourself. I said I'm not going to talk about me. Yeah, but what if you're... What else does it say? Yeah, but how about your mother? I said I'm not going to talk about me. That's the end of that. One problem down. How many more problems are there in life? That's it. I'm not going to talk about me. Yeah, but let me put it to you this way. There is no other way to put it to me. If you mean what you say, people will not be offended. Now I can give you another little response to this, rather than spend 30 minutes on this one area. The rest of the part of the question I was going to use from last time, the person says, observation. If you don't let out at least some personal information, ordinary people seem to think that you're weird. All right. Now that's observation. I've heard that before from you people. That's more a belief than it is an observation, by the way. But, even if this is true, let's say this is true. Then let me point out to you then, if that was true, you can't have it both ways. If what you're saying is true right in the city, that all right, people ask me nosy personal questions, and I either feel like I got to answer, or if I try not to answer, they seem to think I'm weird. All right, let's assume you're correct. Take your damn choice. What do you want? But quit crying about it. And now, of course, I've told you already that that's not the only choices, but if that was, if you were captive forever in the land of old great Chief Two Eyes, you and everybody else, and you say, well, I can either do this or that, all right, take your damn choice and do it. But you can't have it both ways. But notice, everybody thinks they can. Everybody thinks this is a temporary condition. The people keep asking me nosy questions, and I don't want to answer. That hadn't changed. And then when I try not to answer, that doesn't stop them. And if I keep trying, then it just gets into another, it's like some kind of glue. It runs to another area, and then they start looking at me like, well, you're weird. What if that's true? What if that's true? Take one or the other. That's not all there is, but... All right. Question. How can I tell when someone is lying to me or trying to take advantage of me? All right. First off, you would assume, a revolutionist would assume, even a would-be revolution, you've got to assume that everyone else has absolutely no clear idea of what lying or the truth is, and proceed on that basis. That's it. Another part of how can I defuse or not be affected by another person's anger at me? Assuming here that I am referring to an unjust accusation, as I don't have a problem with justified anger. Well, as far as this problem, there is one very specific way I'd point to this problem. And that is, the heart of the problem is not what you said. The heart of the problem is assuming that there are two kinds of accusations. That one's either justified and sending you negative energy, or in the other instance, it's not justified. That's the problem. It's not. You notice the person said they won't know how to take care of how to defuse people being angry, but they parenthetically say that they're not bothered by being justly accused, having anger in a justified way directed to them, but it's when it's unjust. And so they're waiting for an answer to that problem. They say, I answered the real problem. The problem is assuming that there's some kind of difference. It's all energy transfer. And for you to believe that, well, now I can handle justified anger directed toward me. Oh, when I deserve it, I'll take it. But I am really upset when I don't deserve it. A real revolutionist, it's not about he doesn't deserve or she doesn't deserve anger. It's just as moot. It's rain. It's noise. It's the smell of the hog when the hobby is life. It's the appearance of warts when you're locked in a closet with a hog. It's just nothing. You have got to be part of the populace to be subject to someone else's anger, someone else's criticism. I refer you back, if you in some way had established a real monarchy in you, what the hell do you care of underlings inside of you and outside of you going, here, here, I'd like to have a word with you, Your Majesty. I have, since we're using it practically, I continue, well, periodically, from the people in other cities showing these tapes being available and letting the public wandering off the street. I periodically, how do you like this? If you think I'm just responding to you people, I periodically will get a letter from somebody addressed to me, and they'll say, I have seen several of the tapes in such and such city, and really intrigued by it. And they'll, many times they'll say things like, well, I probably haven't seen enough to really understand what your whole system or what all this is about, but after hearing some of it, and then they'll begin to make a string of observations, and the observations are normally on the basis of how much they agree with what I said and how much they disagree, and I'm absolutely off the track, and that, you know, how enthusiastically they knew that I would receive this news, and how what they're saying is how interested they knew they would be, that I would be, in their opinion. And sometimes I am brought to the point of tears. They just knew, and some almost put it outright that, I hope you don't think I'm being pretentious, but somebody intelligent, I'm sure that you would be interested in my intelligent observations and some of the notes I have made herein. That I just knew you'd be delighted to hear from me. I'm just brought to my knees at times. Brought to my knees and in tears. How about a combination? That would be what I'm suggesting to you. You might have to fake otherwise now, out in the ordinary world. You certainly, to you newer people, or visitors, none of this, no matter what you might think you heard me say, has anything to do with you ever operating in a way that even temporarily was detrimental, unprofitable to you. If you did, you're not getting the known result. You were not doing it. You were not prepared to do it. You were not wired up to do it. You shouldn't have tried it. You were not doing it in a revolutionary manner. But out in life, let us say a boss, even a fellow employee, may make some form of criticism. And you may, in your enlightened self-interest, you may have to act like, oh, and you put on a full-fledged, stuffed to the barred costume gills of all, and you go along with it. But if you are what you say you are, if you mean to be what you are, it's like somebody in the crowd trying to spit up to the balcony where the king is. There's somebody down the crowd mumbling, I don't like the cut of her suit today. I don't like the way the queen's got her hair fixed. I don't like the way the king is trimmed his mustache. And if the king hears that, we're not talking about much of a king or queen if they're going inside and have the blues. It's just noise. It's just noise in you when you hear that happening. Well, back to what I started to say, the real problem is assuming that there are two kinds of negative energy transfers, is what the person is really asking, of being either accused, attacked justly, or unjustly. It's all just transfers. It's all just chit-chat going on, people shaking hands, people criticizing one another's clothes and their hair, and it's all being done while all of you are in line for the abattoir. Speaking hypothetically of a hypothetical love life, comma, when is it time to call it quits? All right? The time to call it quits usually is when such a question becomes a continuing when it becomes a continuing part of your thinking about the relationship. Now, of course, I knew you was going to laugh, but that is the answer. That's it. After all, I point out to you that in a quite real sense, if you understand the pretense of love is love, but there comes a time that you're going to have to ask, what intelligent person would pay $89 for a pound of parsley? Standing with a group in a social situation, conversation going on, maybe participation, maybe I'm just listening, then the conversation takes a turn, and people are making comments or laughing, and I don't seem to know what's going on. I seem to have missed everything that's happened, and it seems to be my turn to speak, and I don't know what to say. All right. Well, I can try this. Some of you should hear. Just like I was talking about love, the pretense in everything, in a sense, but especially here I can point out to you, the pretense in the city of interest is interest. The pretense. Now, I'm saying that to revolutionary people, not people in the city, because they're not going to get their known result. You turn, if you feel like it's your turn, the whole purpose, I'm assuming, or I'm using the purpose, I was just skimming through the question, is how to handle a situation you don't know what to say, you feel like you dropped out of the conversation or you're caught flat-footed in an awkward position. Is all you got to do. You can almost do it if you know how, but you really, literally, did not hear the last thing said, and you look up, and they're looking at you like it's your turn to respond to it. All you got to do, you just got to be intelligent enough to be this kind of vague and say, all right, do you want me to respond to the question exactly the way you put it? Or you can say, that is one of the most interesting observations I have heard. Where did you come up with that? And you didn't have to know what the hell they were talking about. To question someone else is always in order. Always in order. Under what might appear to be harsh, unexpected circumstance, the kind of things that I've been talking about, that if you actually could fully mean what you say and what you do, that people won't be offended and etc. But if you seem to be caught flat-footed, it's what I've told you, is always turn questions back on people. What made you begin to think that way? What got you interested in this area? Boy, that sounds like a lot of fun. Or that sounds like a lot of trouble. That sounds like a whole lot of suffering. I feel awkward around certain people in business, blah, blah, blah. The gist of the question is, how can I feel more secure? It was a business-wise question was used as the basis. How can I feel more secure with higher-ups? You've got to by first off realizing that higher-ups are in the death queue with you. More to the point is literally that a real revolutionist, somebody of this kind of life peerage bloodline, royal bloodline, has no higher-ups. You just got different dances going on, and there are places that you do have to willfully act as though, well, yes, that you do have higher-ups. And taken, noted, sir. Yes, you have to do that. But if you know better, it's meaningless. It's not a problem of any kind. There's nothing else to discuss. If you're in such a situation, if you're on the train, the conductor comes by and says, everybody's got to have a ticket. You're an idiot to say, listen, I'm a real revolutionist. I have some kind of secret intelligence, and I don't have to pay your damn ticket. Chances are, if that conductor can't do it, he can call back the engineer and the fireman, and between the three of them, they'll throw you off the train. And you can holler, yes, but I'm a real revolutionist. If you're going to ride the subway, MARTA, BART, the LA buses, if they still have them, the Miami Transit, whatever it is, the Roach machine, you got to pay your money. Jesus. Well, how to deal with certain kind of fear that seems to be native to my secretary. All right? How to deal with. Ask yourself this. What do people actually mean when they say, use the term deal with? Deal with. Fortuitously enough, how about the numerous times that I use the reference to life being like this poker game, that you're all born into the room and you can't get out of the room. You know, the numerous ways I keep using that, I'm beginning to like it almost as much as the revolution. Except it's sort of confining just to one room. But, back to my question, to this question, about the term deal with. All right, what is it? All right. When people say, not just this, but all the time people are saying, how do I deal with? All right, what do they mean? How's the term actually, is life making people use this term? Is it like, how can I be dealt some different cards? Is it more like, on the basis of some particular instance that seems to be a problem, more like, hey, can you deal me out of this game? Or can you at least deal me out of this hand? Or, if we use it on the basis like my version, would be for a way for a new bloodline, your own imposed life period. I assume everybody knows what that is. That's non-hereditary. That's just you. That you're a royal for your lifetime that dies with you. It would be if you had that kind of personally induced royal bloodline in you, would be to deal with, knowing how to deal with the dumbness, the uncertainties, or the person asking the fears of the mob, the populace. That should be the term deal with. Tim, I got 2 minutes. I'm going faster. All right. I have a friend who drinks too much, and it's really uncomfortable for me to see him this way. Don't look at him. Just because you laugh doesn't mean it's funny. If you knew what you were doing, you could have asked, instead of a friend, you could say, my father drinks. Of course, he's been warned. Not just by life, not just by his doctor. You warned him. You warned him that it makes you uncomfortable. But you didn't mean it. And so that's why it's still a problem. If you meant it, that I'm not going to look. This bothers me. However it came about, being alive. It bothers me to see somebody do that. Don't look. If you knew how to do what you want to do, if you knew how to say what you, to mean what you say, you would know that. That's why it's funny to you. That's why some of you visitors on tape, you can probably even say, well, it's silly. It's sarcastic. It's flip. And of course, you're really dumb, that is, city smart, you'd say it's impossible. Because you're the people that you can't drive by and the traffic slowed down and you see flashing lights. You're the people that drive by and you got to go. And so you're right, it's impossible. So forget it. But I answered the question. It bothers you to look at him. How come men seem to get along without women more easily than women get along without men? Because they seem to. All right, you weren't listening. The question, how come men seem to get along without women more easily than vice versa? Because they seem to. All right, that's in the public tape.